Once praised by the left for its lavish welfare state, but the times, well, they're changing. Unlike the rest of Europe, Sweden has not imposed a full lockdown. Instead, they're trying to keep their hospitals from being overrun with minimal interventions to protect the vulnerable and encouraging individual responsibility. So the primary schools, the younger kids, they got to stay in school. Non-essential businesses, churches still open. But somehow this is really, really upsetting to certain cable hosts.
It's very appealing, right? In an ideological sense that Sweden decided we don't need to lock everything down. Let's keep it all loose. But it turns out the virus doesn't care how cool that sounds. Where the rest of us live and die on this planet, Sweden's let not lock anything down approach has actually been pretty disastrous. It's been pretty lethal.
It always depends on how you lay that chart out, by the way. You can make those lines look a lot different depending on what the vertical and the horizontal is. But what's the truth? Well, the death rate in Sweden is about 198 per million. So it's doing worse than Denmark, Norway, and Finland. One reason is the virus swept through Swedish nursing homes, elder homes. And the way Sweden counts deaths may also be a factor. But what happens when you compare Sweden to the rest of Europe? Well, as you can see here, Belgium, Spain, Italy, France, and the UK are all seeing far more deaths per capita despite imposing very strict stay-at-home orders. Well, the truth is we don't really know how the Swedish approach will shake out yet, but it's foolish to simply dismiss it outright. Answering these questions now, we're joined by Johan Norberg, who's a proud resident of Sweden, senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Johan, what are critics missing about Sweden's overall approach here?
Well, I think exactly what you pointed to is something that they're missing, that Sweden is an outlier when it comes to policy because we haven't locked the society down. But we're not an outlier when it comes to outcomes. So that tells you something about how people have misinterpreted what's going on in the world. What they're also missing is that I think that Sweden is a powerhouse when it comes to statistics, because we have, by tradition, a very nosy government that wants to know who's been naughty and who's been nice, what we're doing. And that might be bad in some circumstances, but the good thing is that we know very well who's alive and who's dead. So whereas many countries, they don't count deaths outside of hospitals, COVID-19 deaths. They don't count deaths at home or in nursing homes and so on, whereas Sweden tracks every death, no matter where they took place. We all have a personal ID number. We have to show an ID card every time we meet the doctor. So I think that we catch more of the deaths than other countries do.
Johan, there's I guess it's an epidemiologist, Johan Giesecke, who was asked a question about the severity of the disease there. Watch.
You don't think that the severity of these intervening measures are going to make that much difference?
No, I don't think so. What we're seeing is a tsunami of a usually quite mild disease, which is sweeping over Europe. And some countries do this, and some countries do that, and some countries don't do that. And in the end, there would be very, very little difference.
In the end, there will be very little difference. I love the kind of Swedish dismissiveness. I mean, I like that. I know a lot of Swedish men of that age that have that same, it's kind of appealing. But he's basically, in the end, that the disease is going to do what the disease is going to do. And now we found out, Johan, that herd immunity will be reached in about 2-3 weeks, perhaps, in Sweden, which, I mean, then they're kind of done after the herd immunity, correct?
Yeah, we hope so. And that's why we shouldn't pay too much attention to comparisons of cases and deaths right now, because almost every other country except Sweden has just postponed deaths. They won't avoid them because there's still no argument that has been made that suddenly this disease will go away after their lockdowns are over. And if they're waiting for a vaccine, I mean, that could take a year. If we're lucky, it could take several years. And no society can be shut down completely and shut down the economy for more than a year without ruining society and the economy entirely. And that will kill many more people than the virus does. So with some luck, Sweden will get through this. in a couple of months while protecting those vulnerable and protecting healthcare. And that's the essential thing. Can we manage to mitigate the disease? We can't suppress this, but can we mitigate it to the extent that we can take care of all the cases and make sure that they get the best treatment? Well, in that case, Sweden might be through this in a couple of months while you have it ahead of you.
Yeah, well, it's been fascinating to watch. Sweden's always held up as the example. Everyone has to emulate Sweden until Sweden decided to go its own way. I find it fascinating. Johan, thank you so much. Great to see you tonight. And coming up, what happens when